go through. We've got kind of a discussion guide that we put together with some questions. We're going to encourage our panelists to respond to those, but as we go through, please feel free to raise your hand, ask questions as we go along. I think Teresa is going to play Mr. Microphone, right? So we'll be able to hear everyone's questions and answers. To kick it off, let me just go through the guest panelists here. We have Rich Lalley. Hope I pronounced that right, Rich. Rich is the development director at Operation Warm. Rich is an award-winning entrepreneurial marketing executive that's now following a path of making a positive difference in the world as the development director of Operation Warm, which is a nationally active nonprofit charity supporting children from impoverished households. Rich also has an active pro bono involvement with Rotary International. Prior to joining the nonprofit sector, Rich had an extensive career in advertising and brand management with a number of major ad agencies and consumer brand companies. Secondly, we have Irene Frye. Irene? Okay. Irene is the president of the Retirement Research Foundation. Based in Chicago, RFF is one of the nation's first private foundations devoted exclusively to aging and awards more than $6 million in grants each year to support organizations that conduct advocacy, direct service, research, and professional training programs. Ms. Frye joined RFF in 2008. Previously, she served as Vice President of Community Memorial Foundation, a health conversion foundation in suburban Chicago, and Director of Development for LaGrange Memorial Hospital and the National Safety Council. Audrey Thomas. Audrey's down at the end. Audrey is the CEO of Deborah's Place, and she came to Deborah's Place in 1986. She has held several positions in the organization, including COO before becoming CEO in 2004. Audrey has over 35 years of experience in the field of human services. She's worked extensively both in direct service and in organizational development, management, and evaluation of human service programs. She has a Master's of Art degree from DePaul University School of New Learning in 2005. She also completed the Executive Scholar Program through Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Nonprofit Management. She's a board member of the Chicago Continuum of Care. She's also a founding member and director of the Logan Square Cooperative, a limited equity housing cooperative dedicated to keeping housing affordable in Chicago. Karen Matz. Where's Karen? Okay, Karen is the Global Development Manager for the MDRT Foundation. It's a grant-making foundation that is within the financial services industry. Her main role at MDRT is to create partnerships with charitable organizations to receive over $2 million in grants. Karen has over a decade of experience in fundraising, having led the development strategy at the Posse Foundation in Chicago and also worked at the Mercy Home for Boys and Girls. And then Brenda Swartz. There's Brenda. Brenda was in the technology and consulting industry for 17 years before becoming president and CEO of Concordia Place. She joined Concordia in 2003, which was when it was a single child care center serving 80 children. Today it is a social service organization with 4 centers serving nearly 1,000 children, teens, and adults. To strengthen the viability of its mission, Concordia Place launched its own social enterprise, Concordia Day. At the proceeds from Concordia Day, Early Childhood Center supports the Concordia Place mission. And Concordia has opened 2 Concordia Day centers, and site selection for the 3rd is underway. Brenda serves on the Advisory Council for North Park University's Axelson Center for Nonprofit Management, the DePaul College Prep Board of Directors, and has been an active mentor with organizations such as Chicago Women in Philanthropy and the Chicago Executives Club. Kathy Busey Kielar. Kathy is the Vice President of Development for WTTW and WFMT, Window of the World Communications. Kathy has more than 15 years of experience in planned and major giving. For the last 11 years, she has been with WTTW in Chicago, one of the most watched PBS stations in the nation, and WFMT, a fine arts radio station heard across the globe. In her current position as Vice President of Development, Kathy leads the planned giving program, the major giving annual funds, the matching gift program, and the WFMT on-air pledge drive, which continues to have record-breaking results. Excuse me. Kathy is a past president. She's a past president of the Chicago Council on Planned Giving Board of Directors and a member of the awards and nominating committees. She's also on the National Association of Charitable Gift Planners Board, where she serves as conference chair and is a member of the PBS National Planned Giving Advisory Council. And last but not least, we have Vicki Clarke. Here's Vicki. Vicki is a philanthropic advisor and nonprofit strategist whose experience has ranged from higher education to international development. She most recently served as Vice President of Philanthropy and Development at Heifer International and led major gifts and foundation grants. Under her tenure, she raised more than $30 million, and she led a major gift team that raised just over $25 million in the last 3 years. She's currently on the board of the Aurora Public Library Foundation and continues to be an advocate for women, children, and education causes. So please join me in welcoming our guest panel. So I think we want to kick this off. We put together just some thought starters and questions, I guess, that we want to use, and I'm going to put this forward with the panel. They've all received these in advance. We'd like to hear what they would like to say regarding these subjects, and then also, again, to stress if anybody wants to raise their hand and ask questions, please feel free to do so. Where's another slide? Let's start off with kind of a general question, and the question is, talk about both the past and the future. How has philanthropy changed over time here in Chicago, and will these trends continue into the future? What changes have you seen? We've got two microphones, so you can.
Well, I can start off from the private philanthropy point of view. Since the crash of 2008. Oh, sorry. Is that better? Can you hear me?
No.
Okay. Thank you. The crash of 2008 was devastating for private philanthropies like Retirement Research Foundation. Just to give you an example, in just that year, our corpus went down by $70 million. And it's been a rough road going back. So that has really restricted the amount of funds that were available for grantees. Thankfully, though, we're on a forward progress, and things are going back to normal. But for private foundations, it's been a tough road.
For me, I really think about it in terms of some of those big funders that I've evolved so much in the past 10 years.
So Deborah's Place serves women who are homeless and formerly homeless. We do supportive housing. So I think the changes that I have seen in the field of homeless services and philanthropy is one, much less general operating, and also donors wanting to know the impact and the outcomes, even if that is a donor who is giving like an annual gift of $3,000, a foundation that's giving $3,000. Also the transfer of family wealth to younger people. and that perhaps the older, the parents or the grandparents, the relationship was with specific people within the organization, like the founding mothers or the first executive director. But now the younger people want the relationship with the organization and the cause and the impact. So I would say that those, and also more systems, even bigger foundations that would fund individual programs now want to fund systems change. And particularly in homeless services, they love to fund mergers and strategic alliances and those types of activities.
I'm not going to disagree with either of those points, but maybe add two more. One is I think it'll be really interesting to watch how social impact investing is kind of taken a foothold and to see where that goes, because that plays on the need for measurable impacts and data. And when you're impacting real people's lives in a social service situation, like many of us, that can be really, really hard to measure on a person's life. So it'll be interesting to see how we kind of reconcile those different needs. The other, I think, is there's always been a need. You have to know your audience and tailor your message for your audience. But I see people defining themselves in a more granular way. And we want to also talk about the difference in the generations. And so it's not just granular in who I am and how I identify, but it's also how I want you to communicate with me. And so I think that will be our challenge on our systems, on our teams, on our people, to change the ways that we communicate. And even, we have a couple of major gift officers or people with that experience here. How does that technology change the way we develop relationships in the future?
Something that underscores all of this, I think, is this drive around the economy and people sort of seeing the pie shrink a little bit for themselves, or at least they have the impression they're living under perhaps a feeling of there's less abundance here. So they're making some really strategic choices about where do I invest. And I had a number of conversations with families and family foundations since 08 and 09 about, okay, we need to get really clear about what it is we're going to fund and what we're not. And we're cutting back. So we don't have 40 grantees this year. We're trying to get down to 20. Or, we don't have 80 grantees. This year we're trying to get down to 15. And there's more and more applications every year. So that granularity, I think, comes up in this. It's also about impressions of, are we living in a time of scarcity and uncertainty? And that absolutely affects their philanthropic outlook.
So a trend I've seen in Chicago that my organization works across the country, and it's I see this in Chicago more than other markets that we're active in, and that is an increased focus on nonprofits and other organizations collaborating and forming partnerships. I think that's really driven in part by the Chicago Community Trust and where their focus is, and they have such a huge impact on the community here in Chicago. Chicago is a very unique place in the U.S. from a philanthropy point of view. There are so many phenomenal organizations, and the sense of wanting to tackle problems together is more so here, I think, than in other markets. New York's a very big market for philanthropy. It's much bigger than Chicago, but I don't see the same kind of level of organizations working together to tackle problems.
One more thing, some of it is also policy driven. So for example, when you look at healthcare policy now, if someone is on Medicare and leaves the hospital and is readmitted within 30 days, hospitals will get dinged. So there needs to be that collaboration with organizations that are out in the community that can help hospitals avoid, those discharged from the hospital from being readmitted by developing a care system around them. So there's a lot of federal policies that kind of work their way down into encouraging these kind of collaborations between non-traditional partners like social service organizations and hospitals. And I think there'll be more of that.
Very good.
One more.
One more.
It's okay, go on.
Go, go.
Oh, no, that's okay.
All right. Well, our next question kind of, I think you've already touched on a lot of these points, and the question was that are there factors that have come into play recently that may be even more important in the future? And I guess we can look at the example, what changes have you seen in regard to fundraising geared to a younger generation? How do you reach millennials through technology? Any thoughts on those points?
So a couple of things on just the factors that have come into play recently. And so if anybody has looked at the tax laws that are affecting charitable giving, I think that definitely is something to look at, how people are giving, the vehicles they're using. We're seeing definitely an increase in people giving through their IRAs, through donor advised funds. Donor advised funds have just steadily been increasing over the years. It was $85 billion in 2016, and that just continues to grow. So do we continue to receive that money? That's a whole nother talk anyway. And then also in the coming years with the baby boomers, it's going to be this transfer of wealth that's going to be about $30 billion. It's sort of the biggest transfer that we're going to see over the next 20 years. So that is going to be a huge factor, and where is that money going to go, and how does that benefit all the organizations? So I think those are some things to look at. And then as far as content for the younger generation, I know at our organization it's something that is top of mind. We're always trying to reach that younger audience as well, and so we do try to look at the content we are creating to see if we can reach that younger audience as well.
And in reaching that younger audience, I think it's so important that our websites have to be very mobile friendly, and giving has to be very easy to be able to handle from a phone, not having to create accounts to do that online giving. And then our messaging and brand, the visual brand, just has to be really fresh and appealing broadly to all of our audiences, but it's, I think, really important to the younger generations as well.
And I think that, we always had like a young professional board, but I think realizing that the agency needed to make more of an investment in that young professional board in terms of assigning resources to helping manage and helping them bring on new people, and also on staff, the organization investing in having staff who are dedicated to things like the communications and the technology, and not just putting the stuff on the Facebook, which we like to talk about. I think that young professional board, and I think also in terms of bringing in millennials, they're also looking for organizations that are diverse and inclusive. So that has really impacted us, and really looking at how we are communicating out about how welcoming our organization is in terms of the diversity and inclusivity of all people, and that is really very appealing to younger donors also.
Very good.
Can I add
Sure,
one
Vicki,
thing?
sure.
I was thinking about this organic conversation that popped up kind of in the aisle as we were all getting here, that we kind of gravitated to this idea of the philanthropy that's happening with maybe current generations where wealth is housed right now versus their children and grandchildren. And so there's a constant conversation happening about how do I teach my children and grandchildren to care about things the way that I do? Or how do I teach them about philanthropy so they can give the way that I do? And clearly, just because my grandparents or parents love something doesn't mean I'm going to love it too, right? So being really relevant to that younger set is going to be incredibly important, and it may mean messages change. I think technology has to go with that as well. And I also think that technology is not just an access point to the younger generation. It absolutely is, and I'm so glad you brought up mobile, because we totally fundamentally had a crisis point when we realized this doesn't work on mobile. Our beautiful new website does not work on mobile. Oh my gosh. No, it's not beautiful. It was not. That was a crisis. But I know a gaggle of CEOs who are all on their phone just as much as I am. And so it matters that they can access things, that they can share things. And I think we're very image-driven. I want to mention that today too, because I think that'll come up later too. The way that we present ourselves and the way that happens digitally is just incredibly important. And to interface my digital presence with, you know, the charity's digital presence that I care about, or how I plug in, or how I volunteer matters.
Sir, go ahead.
So I've got two trends that are a little different that I'll talk about briefly. The first one is using technology in the back office, if you will, to automate marketing, to better understand your donor base and who they are, better segment the donor base. So the whole CRM thing, which is really nice in theory, but really difficult to implement well. And you need a combination of really smart strategic people and a combination of really talented technical people. And that's hard sometimes for nonprofits to put together. But there's those that are doing it well reap the benefits from it. The second one, a totally different perspective, is we get an awful lot of support from corporate America. And a trend that's been going on in the corporate world for the last number of years is millennials becoming a key part of the workforce, and millennials insisting that their employers provide them opportunities to make a positive difference in the world. And so we've spent an awful lot of, we've got dedicated resources now on developing programs with companies that allow employees the opportunity to have a terrific feel-good experience for a half a day, which results then in them having a more loyalty, more stickiness, if you will, to their employer, because they feel like they're working in a place that's a great place to work.
Yeah. Kind of coupled with that is the tidal wave of Giving Tuesday, that kind of one day of connecting people, giving people the opportunity to give to a cause that they want, and having organizations mobilize this information about who gave, who volunteered, and keeping track of that data to use it as a way to push forward and expand the donor base.
Very good. Some really good thoughts there. Another question that we kind of came up with here was that, is this: what are the major factors that you see that drive individuals and families charitable giving in the current environment? Are these factors related to the individuals and families, or to external factors? What really drives families and individuals?
I think the good news is that the economy is strong right now, and we see that foundations kind of aside, but for individual people, that how the economy is right now is probably the most important thing. Of course, they have to be attached to your mission, and it's important to remember that, but the tax laws have changed, but for kind of annual giving, most people aren't giving to get a tax deduction. They're giving because they believe in your mission. So I think the economy is strong is the good news. You had to start with the good news, bad news. But the bad news, the tax laws changing, but the good news really is the strong economy.
I'll say just real quick that for us, it more has to do with people, our mission, as far as with everything going on in the world, people are tuning into WFMT. What they always say is it's calming, it's soothing, it's sort of a relief from the world. And for WTTW, we really pride ourselves on being this unbiased place for people to be able to get news and honest news, and hopefully people feel like it's an honest place to get with all the other sort of noise in the world, they're able to come and get something. It's a safe place to be able to listen.
I would say also that moments in time cause people to give. When you look at disasters, the amount of relief that pours in. When you look at things like the Me Too movement, these are things that mobilize a lot of people saying, well, I can give a little and it will help a much bigger cause.
Very good. Kind of a follow-up question to that one is, I'm sorry? Tony?
WTTW, WFMT, and other stations have regular drives, and they offer people the opportunity to give a small amount every month. And I'm wondering, first of all, whether other organizations are doing that, and two, particularly whether you've analyzed that to see who's responding to that. Is there an age cohort? Is there something?
So I think you're referring to the sustaining donors, the ones that continue to give every year. They just do like a monthly. Yeah. So they give every month, and it's continuous. So that it never stops. They just continue, and it's something that's a model that's been really successful for. I know the PBS system, and I know other people do it as well. I think it's for us. We just haven't. It hasn't been an age motivated tool. I think it's just people that don't want to really think about it anymore. I haven't seen any statistics on age. Yes, that would be good, and hopefully in the next few years we can do that. We're actually doing a new CRM too, so we'll see if that makes it easier.
I think too with recurring gifts, they will outgive your donors. It is, I mean, if you're working with a nonprofit that doesn't have a recurring gift program, my gosh, get that going, get it branded, get it marketed, make it be this cool organization to be a part of. Maybe they get recognized, maybe they get special events, but like recurring gifts, I cannot say enough good things in terms of long-term investment. And if you can do a recurring gift program through an ACH instead of a credit card fee, more power to you there too.
I'm not sure if the motivation is necessarily different for entry-level donors or one-time website donors and moving to monthly. There's probably something there that is someone more expert in that area could comment on, but I do want to go back to this idea of motivation because we went through a huge process of trying to understand. Most people know Heifer from the catalog, right? And you all probably have them in your houses right now. The catalog hit dates are, the first catalog drop is in October. So buy those goats, right? But one of the things that we clearly knew is that people were using that as a means of satisfying a need. I need to buy something for Aunt Doris. I'll buy her a goat because she doesn't need another sweater or a box of chocolates. So what's the difference between satisfying a need, an alternative gift giver, versus a mission-driven donor? And I think every nonprofit needs to spend a little bit of time focusing on that because when you move from level to level or type of gift or frequency of gift, there definitely is a motivation factor there that people are paying attention to.
I think at the end of the day, individuals give because they want to make the world a better place in some way, in a way that's meaningful to them. And the implication of that is stewardship is so important. And different nonprofits have different capabilities and effectiveness in their stewardship. You need to tell people thank you, and then thank them, and then thank them, and then thank them again, and then tell them what you did with their money, what their money did, and take yourself out of the equation. They did this for the child, thanks to their gift. And then you can come around and ask again. And there are, organizations that all they do is ask and ask and ask and ask, like politicians, right? That's the other question I've got is I wonder what the impact is on the psyche of donors with the huge increase in digital electronic asking by politicians. I don't know about you, but I can't, I must get 50 solicitations a day from politicians, and some politicians I get 3 or 4 in the same day. And that's got to have some long-term impact on people's perceptions about being asked and resistance maybe to that.
Marianne?
I should perhaps know the answer to this question, but I don't, so I'm going
Wait for the microphone.
Oh. So I'm going to ask it in case other people don't know either. I was just wondering, do each one of you have your own mobile app, or is there like a general giving app that somebody can access and then you're listed on that app and you can automatically do the giving through your phone? And then I'm famous for several questions. Is there a CRM system specifically for nonprofits that works particularly well? I mean, I know Salesforce and so forth, but are there any, especially for nonprofits?
There are.
I'm a Razor's Edge fan. I don't know about the rest of you. For CRM, I use Razor's Edge Blackbaud products. I don't know if anyone else uses it.
Next or?
No, not yet, but we're signed up for it.
What I'll say is that we are actually in the process of researching all of the different products out there, CRMs, and so there's actually quite a few. It just depends on what your organization's needs are. So for instance, for us, we need something that's going to work well, not only with just regular giving, but also then with tickets and pledge and all these other things that we do. And we also have a sales team. So I would just look, what are those things that you actually need out of the system, and then you can go and look at all the different systems. And then I just want to do part 2 of your question, which was the apps, and we do have a WFMT app you can give on, you can listen, and same with WTTW as well.
But there's no common app?
I don't know if there's a common app because, yeah, they created one.
That might be
I think the most important thing is to be able to give mobily from your phone, from your website, and then the back office, vendor that is doing that processing of whether it's credit card or we've used, the name just went out of my mind, but we're actually looking at the front end changing and by front end I'm actually meaning the CRM. We actually have used Razor's Edge for quite a few years, but have found it just a bit cumbersome. We've used all the Blackbaud suite with Financial Edge, Education Edge for our children's records, and as well as Razor's Edge. And there's a value to having that be cohesive in one system, but we're looking at now the benefits of having a more dynamic CRM for our donors, and just managing that pipeline better. And so we're looking at Tapestry, Salsa. I don't know if anyone has used that one yet, but that was a serious contender. And Realm is one that is kind of in a beta stage, so we're looking at, do we want to be a guinea pig or not? No.
From a giving perspective, there's a ton of CRMs. There's also a ton of platforms for doing online giving, and they all have different strengths and weaknesses and levels of customer support and ability to customize what donation pages look like, and if you can add crowdfunding or peer-to-peer as a part of it. For us, crowdfunding and peer-to-peer is an important part of our model. We do a ton of community programs with Rotary clubs or fire locals or PTAs, and we provide them then an opportunity to raise money for their project specifically through a crowdfunding platform, or for people who are even more ambitious through a peer-to-peer platform. And all of that looks and feels like our website, but it's actually hosted on a vendor's website. And if you're using a CRM system, you've got to put a program in place so that those transactions automatically come into your CRM. Otherwise, you're going to be just having somebody spending way too much time logging manually donations.
Got another question in the back?
Yes, two questions. The first one is, you sort of touched on it when you talked about partnerships and so forth, but how do you handle, among the diverse organizations that you represent, competition for the donor dollar, in distinguishing yourselves among other charitable organizations seeking that donor dollar? And the second thing is, are you seeing a phenomenon, this is from just kind of a personal experience, where a charitable organization that's more regional is suddenly going more national? The example is, I get a phone call asking to donate to the Wives and Children's Survival Fund from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Department. So is there a growing phenomenon of what have been traditionally regional charitable organizations seeking those regional dollars going more national, or expanding their sort of donor base, if you will?
Thoughts?
Well, I'll just say, I think from the regional perspective, hopefully, if you have a very large organization and they have different regional areas that feed into a national sort of hub, then hopefully that they're working better together, and that's why you're seeing that. I haven't not heard any specific trends, but I will say even for us as a PBS, there's 330 stations across the country, yet our headquarters nationally lives in Virginia. So we're always trying to be seen as one, right? And maybe that's what's happening. I think people are really trying to get that message that it is one out.
So in homeless services, there's an incredible amount of competition, not just for the philanthropic dollars, but also for our government funding. I think in Chicago around homeless services, we have done a really good job of building a continuum of care. And even though we are competitors, we're also colleagues. And what's grown in the last, probably 6 to 7 years is more partnerships where one partner might get, funding from a source, and it's probably a combination of government and private, and then might share that in some way, so it's like a hub around a particular service that one agency has the funding, and then, that funding is shared by around a specific service. But I think for Deborah's place, what we recently did was we hired a consultant to help us craft our case for support. I think for a long time our message was we're just the best, we're the fastest and the smartest and the goodest that there is, and that's why you should give us money. And so now we are really working with a consultant to craft our case for support that is about not so much that we're the best or the fastest, but what is the unique value that we bring to helping end homelessness in the city of Chicago, and really working to connect with the philanthropic community, individual donors, corporations, or foundations around what we're doing, and if that resonates with them, and particularly for us, women and women-identified people who really want to, at this moment in time, also really be helping women. So, yeah.
I have a question and an observation. That's okay? Go ahead. One is an observation. In 1 week from organizations that I support, I got solicitations, put us in your will. It was like an email went out from the Council on Foundations that said, okay, y'all, get on Planned Giving. I assume that is in fact, it goes along with the transfer of wealth, but has Planned Giving initiatives sort of risen in terms of the portfolio of tools that organizations are using? Certainly, I have observed that it seems to be more of an issue now. So that's a question. And also in terms of the item that Rich brought up about connections with corporations and getting people involved. Getting volunteers to have meaningful work and then translating that volunteer energy into donations is certainly a challenge that I have seen. That people sort of say, well, I give my time, why do I have to give my money? As opposed to, I give my time, therefore I should give my money. So if you could comment on it.
I think that you just answered your own question, actually, for Planned Giving. So what we see is the highest percentage of people that are going to leave your organization at Planned Gift are your volunteers. So they do think right now, at least, that they're giving their time. But if you're having those conversations with volunteers, those are the people that are closest to you. So those are your highest sort of folks that would be giving you a Planned Gift. I think it's interesting that you said it was the last week. Let's see, October 17th. That whole week was the National Estate Planning Awareness Week. I don't know if you knew that. It's a thing. And we actually do a we do a Get Your Ducks in a Row campaign every year for that. So there is definitely I would say, an increase in bequest giving every year. We see that in the Giving USA chart. And then also, if your organization's not doing it, start it. Anything, just start it, because it is a really good revenue generator, and it will increase always.
John's got a question.
Yes, I was interested in the first comment that came out, which is that people want to know the impact and outcomes. And I wonder how that plays to the more generic charities like the United Way, the Catholic, Jewish foundations, and so on, who are donating to a number of different people needs, and whether this trend is hurting them.
Any thoughts?
I don't know, I'm not an expert on United Way, but I know United Way is struggling in a lot of places. And they're changing their models in a lot of places. So for example, United Way of Lake County is much more of a direct service provider today than a lot of United Ways. And I think that they did that in part to be able to demonstrate discernible outcomes for their program. They decided to get very focused on early childhood literacy and a few other areas, and then they develop and execute their own programs as opposed to just being a conduit to collect money, take a bunch of administrative expenses off the top, and then pass the rest on to other people.
Can I say too, I think this links back to the CRM questions as well, because nonprofits have had to get much clearer about segmenting their donors and being clear about how did this donor come to us, why did they give, did they designate that gift in any way, did they happen to come in through another channel, so we need to tag them according to that channel as well. And it may influence, how you're marketed to in the future, what mailings you get. Do we screen you in a certain way automatically because you gave in this way or with this kind of channel, so that we can later decide, oh, this is a good plan giving prospect because we put them in this channel, we do this research, then we know we need to put them on this track.
I would say nonprofits too are just being challenged to use business acumen. They're being challenged to run efficiently, figure out their specialization, what is the ROI on their programs, United Way, if they've been doing the same thing for 50 years, what's the impact of it versus the amount of labor used versus the supplies, and it's really forcing a lot of nonprofits to take a look at their models and see what they're doing and what the ROI is on the program. I think a great example of that is JP Morgan Chase. Back in 2012, their CEO was like, hey, where are we putting this $200 million and what are we doing with it? And the answer was, I don't know, we're giving it away. And if you look through their strategy that they've developed since 2012, not that long ago, and someone like JP Morgan Chase, I think they're a great example to see what funders want from nonprofits in the future.
She mentioned a minute ago segmenting your audience. I'll tell you one of the things we want to put in place next year, we don't have it technologically in place today, but being able to do a monthly newsletter by email that is customized by who you are. So the email template may have 5 articles in it, but we may choose from 10. And so this group of people get this article as the lead, this group of people get a different article as the lead, and don't get this article over here at all. And you're doing all of that based upon what your system is telling you people are interested in and have demonstrated through their behavior they're willing to support.
First, I just want to say JP Morgan Chase is Deborah's place banker. Which is interesting because up until that time, 2012, we were always, we would get a grant from JP Morgan Chase because we had our money there. Our personal banker would get a ticket and come to our event, and that's how the relationship was. Now, we are not eligible for their grants, even though we have, well, for them it's not a lot of money, but, a few $1 million, and they're our banker, we aren't eligible. So I think it's because they, again, like private philanthropy have become very interested in certain high impact, what's considered more globally high value type of giving. So an organization, an individual organization like Deborah's Place that's serving 400 women a year just doesn't have the same, yes, they can't leverage that in the same way. It doesn't have the same impact. So, yeah.
But we love them because they're our banker.
I do think that's one of the trends, is that the corporate giving is focused much more on deeper relationships and a care about a certain cause. Sometimes it's a little self-serving, not to be too cynical, but like with the Chase is the example that, they're looking to create a workforce that they could then hire. So when the job market is so tight, I think that it is a good idea, but it also is helpful to them. And so they, they're looking to have those ties be more to a larger impact and not as maybe to a smaller nonprofit such as Concordia Place or Deborah's Place.
Yeah, John?
Just to follow, is cause-related marketing still relevant?
Yes, absolutely.
From a corporate standpoint?
Absolutely, and it's growing. There's a fantastic conference that takes place here in Chicago every year, a national conference, the Cause Marketing Forum. And there's actually two aspects of corporate giving. There's three: traditional philanthropy. There's cause marketing, which tends to be driven by marketing people who are trying to figure out how to sell more of their product through an association with causes. And then there's, as I mentioned before, this whole HR-related thing that's focused on trying to have employees feel better about where they work so that they stay and they don't take another job for a 5% raise. A great example, there's a number of companies that are like this, I think, is Salesforce, who all of their giving philanthropy starts by supporting grassroots causes that their employees have put together. And they won't give a grant to an organization unless it's had a couple of years of employees doing their own fundraising that get matched by the Salesforce Foundation. But then if you get to a certain level with that, they'll then pour more money into that because they're trying to support the things that are important to their employees.
Yeah, I feel as though we could go another hour here. It's really been a good discussion, and unfortunately, got a tight time frame. So, keep going. Okay, we got more time for questions.
I'm just wondering, in this current environment of perpetual social change that happens all the time, it seems like we have a different social issue every day. How dramatically is philanthropy affected, especially for your organizations, in terms of, do you have to turn around and chase new donors very frequently? Do you have to reorient your strategy towards how you get funded? And how is it specifically in Chicago these days?
I think that anytime there's something going on in the media or a larger social trend, there's a temptation to say, yeah, we do that. But I think you have to be very true to your mission and not chase money by changing the what you do for that reason. You might change, though, how you talk about it, and there may be, this kind of goes back to really being able to target your audience and segment your messaging so that it's relevant to what's going on now or to that audience. So I'm a big proponent, never change why you do what you do. You change what you do based on larger trends that maybe there's someone else in the market that is providing that service in a better, more impactful way. Maybe it's not needed so much. For those reasons, you change maybe what you do. Never change the why, and don't chase money for that. But to take advantage of what's going on in the world and in the city, whatever it is, to change maybe how you talk about it.
Question in the back.
My question relates to the use of donor money. Two parts. Has the donor or have the donors demands for giving their money to be used more efficiently? And several of you touched on that question. Some metrics and also this is how we use your money. But can you speak more? I'd like to learn more as how are the organization responding to those areas? Do you have to prove to the donors that you use their money well and efficiently? And have they increased their demands on you to respond to use your money efficiently?
An interesting trend over the last 5 or 6 years from the institutional donors, foundations and that sort of thing is a growing realization that to run a business successfully, you need to invest in the business. You can't, if you want a good fundraiser, you need to hire a good fundraiser. You're not going to just get somebody as a volunteer who's going to have that be their third priority in life and do that very well. If you want somebody who, if you need to leverage technology, you need to hire people who know how to leverage technology. You need to do all the things that a for-profit company does to build their business by investing in their business. And the foundation world, I think, is, particularly in Chicago, I mean, the Donors Forum has been on the forefront now, has really been on the forefront of preaching that, that the days of looking at what the percentage of spending that's being spent in non-program areas, while a lot of people still have that and they want to know, they want to look at that metric, what's acceptable for that number has increased over time. And that's a good thing, because the difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit really, in my mind, the only difference is a for-profit has shareholders who take a piece of the profits. A nonprofit, if they're successful, is turning a profit every year and plowing those profits back into their business so they can have more impact.
And I'll just add, I think that's exactly true, that foundations especially are really looking at what is the impact that you're using our donation for. But in general, as a not-for-profit, we're always accountable to use the dollars that are given to us in a way that our donors want them to. So if they designate it to a certain project, but most people, I feel like, at least we have seen, still want to support the organization as a whole. They want to do unrestricted giving. They want to make sure everything we do is supported. So and we definitely are accountable and do an annual report every year, so people can always, you can see the financials out there clearly, it's public. So, I mean, as long as your organization is being, I feel like, transparent, then your donors are going to feel good about that, and they'll know where their dollars are going, and you're communicating that with them.
And I just want to say too that, like in our arena, there is so much accountability. We get government funding, we get private dollars. So there is somebody at our building, looking at, we're just accountable every day in every way. But I think a few years ago we decided to not, to kind of shift our culture, not look at it as so much these external forces doing something to us or requiring something from us, but also a culture of continuous improvement, that we want to understand how we're using those dollars, that we want to understand if we're having the biggest impact. So really, I think it's a great thing when organizations like mine can just adopt, integrate a culture of continuous improvement, where each year you're looking at your programs or your services or your structure and asking yourselves in a really embedded, institutionalized way, are we making the best use of our dollars? How much is this program costing us? What is the return on investment? Because that's helping us be a better organization. So yes, we have to answer to all of these external stakeholders, but internally we also want to know, because then the better we are, the better we're offering services to the people who need us.
And I'll just close with, or maybe add on to that remark, that not only do you want to know internally how you're doing, but I also think we can make it easier or hard on ourselves by promising maybe too much granularity in what their gift might be used for. When Concordia Place just, we're in the last legs of our capital campaign, but we did a blended campaign, and to our individual donors, we were very upfront with them that their pledge was for Concordia now and for Concordia in the future. So we had been very clear that it was for current operations as well as for this capital campaign. So we did this blended campaign, and so there wasn't this, you know, constant, well, is this campaign going, this gift going toward the campaign, or is this gift going toward the annual needs?
Well, thank you for all of your insight. My question is around your org chart. Does everyone on the panel have a dedicated fund development manager or director that is solely focused on that initiative? Imagine yes, right? Okay, thank you.
Another question?
Yeah. One of the first organizations I worked with to do a strategic plan with the ESC, and as part of that, what we realized was the organization was churning donors. If they could have hung on to some of the ones they had, as opposed to spending most of their energy finding new ones, they would have done a lot better. And also, that their major fund event of the year was this giant gala that their associate board loved, but produced almost no money. And so, of course, our input was, you really got to take a hard look at this. And they did not have the willingness, the whatever, to make major changes. Have any of you experienced in your organization major shifts in how you look at acquiring contributions in at the level of, you know, we need to actually put our money in hanging on to donors as opposed to getting new ones all the time? And also, we can't do that fundraiser anymore because we're making no profit. It just churns a lot of time.
Well, we had an experience where we had a large gala event in certain regional centers. So sort of local volunteers and local, almost de facto affiliate councils of donors and volunteers came together to support events. And that happened throughout the, let's say, late 80s, early 90s. And those kind of just fizzled and went away. They didn't have national organizational support. We instituted a large gala in LA and ran that for 4 years. It didn't make enough money to cover costs until its third year. And in the process, you know, you get to a point where you say, we're in the black now, we're doing well, we have some name recognition around this event. And we had to be really clear about, are we doing this for recognition? Are we building a base here somehow? Is there a key constituency we want to tap into in this market? And is that more important than making money? There are, I mean, I'm pretty anti-event. I think it's a really great way to harness volunteers. And a really great way to lose a lot of time and staff dedication. It's a good way to generate angry emails, circulating internal, right? Because it just sucks everything out and it becomes an all-encompassing focus for us, and really hard to make money. I want to say, though, that building something from the grassroots that's authentic to the organization makes a lot of sense to me. So when it has this swell of support, you get people behind it. You almost need like this silent phase of the event where you have early donors, early supporters for this, and that you know what your real outcomes are. What's the ROI we want out of this event or this gathering or this conference? Let's make sure that we hit those targets. And what are we willing to sacrifice in the process?
We actually, probably 5 years ago, changed the way we did our gala. And it went from being about $500,000 to now $1 million a year. And it's because we have board buy-in. If your leadership is supporting you, and what you were saying is if you have the before dollars, our gala sells out in March. We don't have it till May. So if you're getting all your dollars in the door ahead of time, and again, honestly, we use it not only as a fundraiser for the dollars in the door for the gala, we're also very strategic about having some of our key board members fill their tables with people we want to get to know. So it then has this steady stream of further income for us throughout the year. So I think that's really important to, when you were saying it's the strategy behind it, but also you have to have that leadership support.
I just wanted to say a word about relationships. I recently did a little analysis of my own giving and realized that I've given a couple of $1,000s to agencies specifically because a close colleague has gone to those agencies and my money followed her. Now, they were all in the same, arena. I mean, it wasn't like she was for pets and then for the environment or something. It was all the same sort of arena. But that relationship and the way that she has capitalized on it has made me give more money than, I might have otherwise. That sort of personal relationship, which I think gets lost sometimes with the importance of technology and everything else. And then I just, forgive me, looked at my email and saw my first Giving Tuesday request. And if I do it online, it'll be matched dollar for dollar, which is a pretty good deal. And, so that may make me give that organization the choice because it's a match.
Yeah, and that's another trend that hasn't been mentioned up here, but the use of matching has just exploded. And we're always looking for new ways to bundle money together to leverage one donor's gift to get another donor's gift, or revenue from somebody else. And there's lots and lots of ways to do it, and more people are doing it. It's almost the point now where on Giving Tuesday, if you don't have a match, you're not even in the game.
Can I speak to acquisition and retention? Because I think that's what keeps most of us up at night, right? Is our acquisition rate high enough? Are we falling off the end? How long do we hold on to donors before they drop off our curve? My soapbox is always love the donors you have. Pay attention to the donors that are on the rolls now and that are recently lapsed. Those folks came to you and loved you for a reason. Whether it's, my neighbor Susan recommended you, or, Aunt Doris gave me a gift that's related to your work, or I see the good work that you do. I ran across a newsletter. Capitalize on that love and love them back, because that is the easiest money to find. That is the low-hanging fruit. And it matters. In this age of technology, and we are less connected and more connected all at the same time, more than ever before, that human personal touch, if you can create it for your nonprofit, will always pay back tenfold.
Very good. We're going to take one more question. Tim, what do you think?
Just one quick question. Is there a balance in terms of your developmental campaigns, your development campaigns? Is there a balance between seeking corporate donations versus the institutional grant-making organizations versus the individual donor that you try to strive for?
As a service delivery organization, you're always wanting to have that healthy balance, but it can have large swings for us anyway, that as there are, we lost 3 large foundational supports in one program area in a year, and so that can swing and have a major change. So I just think that you want overall it to be something that can handle as there's shifts in what is maybe popular to fund, that can sustain that.
And I would just also add that I think if you look at that, again, I'll just refer back because I think it's a really good chart, the Giving USA chart. It will show you mostly individuals are where you're going to receive most of your dollars from. And corporations and foundations are in there too, and sometimes you'll receive larger gifts even from foundations. But to keep your core individuals, I think, is really sort of that sweet spot. I know for us it's 60% of our giving. But we do break out, I mean, we have people that focus specifically on foundations and they have a goal, and someone specifically on corporations and so forth. So those are also very important to build, but what's best for your organization?
Yeah, we've got just a couple more minutes. One more question. John.
Do you have any advice for Executive Service Corps who doesn't deliver the direct service to the needy but helps those who do? And in terms of raising money for this indirect kind of service, but should we be doing more of it and less of it?
I would just say that the comments about retaining your current donors, I know that our board has term limits, so we're always having board members who turn over. And the first thing is always about acquiring new donors, new donors, new donors. Has anybody reached out to Oprah? Has anybody reached out to, it's like this litany of people. Have we tried, getting these people or new people? But all it took was a consultant to come in and tell them, retain your current donors, invest in the donors that you have because they love you. And all of a sudden, it's all about retaining our current donors. And so they're willing, so now they're making pre-end of the year thank you calls, they're writing personal notes to current donors. So I would just say that for things that seem to make common sense, or that that sometimes information delivered by an external consultant or party goes a long way to helping just people hear the message from a different messenger.
And we talked about it earlier, but investing in your resources. So whether it's your team, the skills on your team, if your team is too really good experience in events. But I looked at my team recently, and I have way too many back office people on my advancement team. It's like you're supposed to be the ones out there, creating those deeper relationships, whether it's stewarding existing donors or not. And then the other investment, I think, would be in technology.
And just one last, I think this might wrap it. So relationships and retention. I think those are the things that you can take away. It's all about the relationships. Those are the people, your board relationships for connections that they're going to give you, your individual team's relationships, your staff retention as well. If you have people staying for a long time, they're going to have those deeper relationships.
Well said. This has been great. We went almost an hour and a half, so I'm sure we could have gone a lot longer. Let's give our panel a big hand. And thank you again for taking time out of your day to join us.